"Remove this pathetic woman immediately." Victoria's voice sliced through the elegant ballroom like a blade. "She doesn't belong here with successful people." The champagne flute trembled in my hand as I stood frozen near the entrance of the Grandview Hotel's main ballroom in Charlotte, North Carolina. I had just arrived at what was supposed to be my husband Trevor's company celebration, wearing my finest navy dress and genuine smile. Instead, I found myself witnessing a conversation that shattered everything I thought I knew about my 20-year marriage. "My name is Simone Delgado. I'm 48 years old, and I had just discovered that my husband's business associates, and apparently his mistress, saw me as nothing more than dead weight." Victoria Sterling, a blonde woman in her 30s with sharp features and an even sharper tongue, continued her performance for the small crowd gathered around her. "That's the worthless wife who holds Trevor back," she announced with practiced cruelty, gesturing in my direction without even looking at me. "If he had any sense, he would have divorced her years ago. She contributes absolutely nothing to his success." The group around her included several faces I recognized from Trevor's office, people who had smiled at me during company picnics and holiday parties. Now they nodded along with Victoria's assessment, their expressions ranging from amused to uncomfortable. I felt my cheeks burn with humiliation, but something deeper stirred within me. These people had no idea who they were talking about. Trevor appeared at Victoria's side, his arm sliding possessively around her waist. In that moment, watching him pull her close while she continued to mock me, I understood that this wasn't just office gossip or a momentary indiscretion. This was a woman who felt comfortable enough to publicly humiliate his wife while he stood there and allowed it. "Simone shouldn't even be here," Trevor said quietly, though not quietly enough. "This is a business event." His words hit me like a physical blow. 20 years of marriage, and he spoke about me as if I were an unwelcome intruder at his success. The irony was so bitter I almost laughed. If only they knew the truth about who really funded Trevor's rise to prominence, who had been the silent partner behind every major deal, every expansion, every triumph they were celebrating tonight. I set down my champagne flute on a nearby table and walked calmly toward the exit. No scene, no confrontation, no tears. As I passed their group, I caught Victoria's smug smile and Trevor's guilty glance. Neither of them had any idea what storm they had just unleashed. The evening air outside felt cleaner somehow, and as I drove home to our house in Myers Park, I was already making plans. The drive home gave me time to process what I had witnessed, but more importantly, it gave me time to remember exactly who I was before I became Trevor's wife. 25 years ago, I had been Simone Delgado, a shrewd business strategist who had turned a small consulting firm into a multi-million-dollar enterprise. When I met Trevor at a networking event in 1999, he was a mid-level manager at a struggling manufacturing company called Kristen Global, drowning in debt and poor decisions. Our courtship had been whirlwind romance mixed with business strategy sessions. Trevor was charming, ambitious, and desperately in need of someone who understood how to navigate complex financial waters. I found his enthusiasm endearing and his potential undeniable. When we married in 2004, I made what I thought was a romantic gesture. I quietly invested $12 million of my own money into Kristen Global, purchasing a 30% stake through a shell company I controlled. Trevor never knew the full extent of my involvement. He believed the mysterious investor who had saved his company was some faceless hedge fund. I preferred it that way initially, thinking our marriage should be built on love rather than business obligations. Over the years, as Kristen Global grew from a failing manufacturer into a successful logistics and supply chain management company, I continued to funnel strategic advice and additional capital through intermediaries. My own consulting business, Velwick Solutions, continued to thrive independently. I had built a client base that included Fortune 500 companies seeking guidance on mergers, acquisitions, and corporate restructuring. The work was demanding but fulfilling, and it generated more than enough income to support both my lifestyle and my secret investments in Trevor's company. Looking back now, I realized how naive I had been to think Trevor would value my contributions once he discovered them. Instead, he had grown increasingly dismissive of my work over the years, referring to my consulting as playing office, and suggesting I should focus more on supporting his career. The most painful part was how he had begun to believe his own revised history, where his success was entirely self-made. As I pulled into our driveway, I noticed Trevor's Mercedes was still absent. He was probably still at the celebration, basking in praise for achievements that my money and strategic guidance had made possible. Victoria was likely still there too, playing the role of the supportive companion she believed she was destined to become. I unlocked the front door and headed straight to my home office. 20 years of marriage were about to end, but not before I reclaimed everything that was rightfully mine. Trevor had made a critical error tonight. He had forgotten that the woman he was so eager to discard was the same woman who held the keys to his entire empire. My home office had always been my sanctuary, a space where I conducted the business that Trevor and his colleagues dismissed so casually. Tonight it became my war room. I powered up my computer and pulled out the secure files I kept in a locked cabinet, documents that Trevor had never bothered to ask about and certainly never thought to examine. The paperwork told a story that would have shocked every person at that celebration. Velwick Solutions wasn't just my independent consulting firm. It was the parent company of Shadow Creek Investments, the mysterious hedge fund that owned 30% of Kristen Global. Over the past 20 years, my additional investments had increased that stake to 42%, making me the largest single shareholder in my husband's company. The financial records painted an even starker picture. The joint accounts Trevor and I shared contained nearly $800,000, but what he didn't realize was that I was the one who had been funding those accounts. My consulting income had supported our lavish lifestyle, while his salary from Kristen Global had been modest at best. Even his recent bonus, the one they were celebrating tonight, existed because of cost-saving strategies I had anonymously provided through my business contacts. I opened my laptop and began accessing our shared financial accounts. The first step was simple. I transferred every dollar from our joint checking and savings accounts to my personal business account. $837,000 moved with a few keystrokes. Trevor's personal account contained about $15,000, money from his most recent paycheck. Next, I called Harrison Webb, my corporate attorney, despite the late hour. Harrison had handled my business affairs for over 15 years and was accustomed to urgent situations. "Simone," he answered on the second ring. "This is unexpected. Is everything all right?" "Harrison, I need you to prepare immediate paperwork for several actions. First, I want to divest my stake in Kristen Global effective tomorrow morning. All 42%. I want it sold to their primary competitor, Draythorn Industries." There was a pause. "That's a significant decision. May I ask what's prompted this?" "My marriage is over, and I'm removing myself from all business entanglements with Trevor. He's made it clear he doesn't value my contributions, so I'm withdrawing them completely." "Understood. Draythorn will likely jump at the opportunity to acquire that stake. It would give them considerable leverage over Kristen Global's operations. What else do you need?" "Cancel the Meridian project contract. Velwick Solutions was set to provide consulting services worth $2.5 million to Kristen Global next quarter. I want that agreement terminated immediately. Consider it done. Anything else?" "Yes. I want divorce papers prepared and served tomorrow afternoon. I'll email you the details, but I want this handled quickly and efficiently." After ending the call, I sat back in my chair and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. In the span of 30 minutes, I had effectively dismantled the financial foundation of Trevor's life. Tomorrow, he would discover that his mysterious investor had been his wife all along, and that same wife had just handed his biggest competitor the power to destroy everything he had built. The next morning arrived with unusual clarity. I had slept better than I had in months, which surprised me given the magnitude of what I had set in motion. By 7 a.m., I was dressed in one of my sharpest business suits and reviewing the final paperwork Harrison had sent over during the night. Everything was in order. the divestment papers, the contract cancellations, and the divorce filing. My phone had been buzzing since 6 a.m. with missed calls from Trevor, but I ignored them. He would have discovered the empty bank accounts by now, probably when his morning coffee purchase was declined. I imagined his confusion turning to panic as he checked our joint accounts online and found them completely drained. At exactly 9 a.m., my phone rang with a call from Gerald Morrison, the chief executive officer of Kristen Global. Gerald had always been polite to me at company functions, though he had never suspected my true role in his company's success. "Simone?" Gerald's voice was strained. "I need to speak with you urgently. Could you come in today?" "Of course, Gerald. Is everything all right?" "We've received some unexpected news this morning. It concerns the company's ownership structure. Trevor is here, and frankly, we're all quite confused about some developments." I checked my watch. Harrison would have submitted the divestment paperwork to Draythorn Industries at market opening. By now, Kristen Global's leadership would be learning that their largest investor had sold their stake to their primary competitor. "I'll be there within the hour," I said. The drive to Kristen Global's headquarters gave me time to prepare for what would undoubtedly be a confrontational meeting. I had spent 20 years watching Trevor take credit for successes that my money and guidance had made possible. Today, he would learn the truth about who had really been running the show. When I arrived at the sleek downtown office building, Trevor was waiting in the lobby, his face flushed, and his usually perfect hair disheveled. The moment he saw me, he rushed over. "Simone, what the hell did you do?" he demanded, his voice echoing in the marble-lined space. "The bank accounts are empty, and Gerald is saying something insane about our primary investor selling to Draythorn. This has to be some kind of mistake." I looked at him calmly. "There's no mistake, Trevor. I emptied our accounts because they were funded by my income, and I sold my stake in Kristen Global because I no longer wish to be involved with the company." His face went pale. "What are you talking about? Your stake? You don't own any part of Kristen Global." "Actually, I owned 42% until this morning. Shadow Creek Investments, the mysterious hedge fund that saved your company 20 years ago. That was me, Trevor. Every major capital injection, every strategic decision that turned this company around. That was my money and my guidance." Trevor stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. "That's impossible. You're a consultant. You don't have that kind of money. I built Velwick Solutions into a multi-million-dollar firm before I met you. While you were struggling as a mid-level manager, I was already successful. I invested in your company because I believed in you, and I continued to support it because I thought we were partners. Last night, I realized how wrong I was. Security guards were approaching, probably called by someone who had noticed our increasingly heated conversation in the lobby. Trevor grabbed my arm, his grip tight enough to bruise. "You can't do this to me," he said desperately. "Victoria was just talking last night. She didn't mean anything by it. This is my company." I pulled my arm free. "No, Trevor. It was my company. Now it belongs to Draythorn Industries, and they're going to do whatever they want with it, including, I suspect, removing executives who can't justify their positions." The elevator ride to Gerald's office was the longest of Trevor's life, judging by his increasingly frantic expressions. I remained calm, even peaceful. 20 years of hidden resentment and suppressed frustration were finally being released, and the sensation was intoxicating. Gerald Morrison's corner office normally commanded respect with its panoramic view of Charlotte's skyline, but today, the atmosphere was thick with tension. Victoria Sterling was there, seated near the window, her confident demeanor from the previous night notably absent. She looked up when we entered, her face a mask of barely controlled anxiety. "Simone," Gerald began carefully, "I've been trying to understand the situation. We received notification this morning that Shadow Creek Investments has sold their 42% stake in Kristen Global to Draythorn Industries. This is unprecedented. It's also devastating," added James Fletcher, the chief financial officer, who was pacing near Gerald's desk. Draythorn now controls nearly half our company. They could force a merger, dissolve key contracts, even restructure our entire leadership team. Trevor slumped into a chair, his face ashen. Simone, please tell them this is some kind of misunderstanding. You can't possibly be Shadow Creek Investments. I opened my briefcase and withdrew a folder containing 20 years of documentation. These are the financial records showing every investment Shadow Creek made in Kristen Global, along with the strategic recommendations that accompanied each capital injection. You'll find that every major success this company has achieved can be traced back to those recommendations. Gerald examined the documents, his eyes widening as he recognized financial strategies that had been implemented over the years. These projections, these market analyses, they're identical to the reports Shadow Creek provided. How is this possible? Because I wrote them, I said simply. Shadow Creek Investments was my way of supporting Trevor's career without damaging his pride. I thought it was romantic at the time. The successful wife secretly funding her husband's dreams. I realize now how foolish that was. Victoria finally spoke, her voice lacking its previous confidence. You're saying you've been secretly controlling this company for 20 years? Not controlling, supporting. There's a difference, though I don't expect you to understand it. I turned to face her directly. Last night, you called me a worthless wife who contributes nothing to Trevor's success. You suggested I should be removed from his life. I decided to take your advice. Trevor stood up suddenly, his chair scraping against the floor. This is insane. You can't destroy my entire career because of something Victoria said at a party. I'm not destroying your career, Trevor. I'm simply removing my contributions from it. If your career can't survive without my money and guidance, then perhaps it wasn't as solid as you believed. James Fletcher was still reviewing the financial documents. The Meridian project contract was also canceled this morning. Velwick Solutions was set to provide consulting services worth $2.5 million. That was scheduled to be our largest contract next quarter. Velwick Solutions will no longer be working with Kristen Global in any capacity, I confirmed. Gerald cleared his throat. Simone, I understand you're upset, but surely we can work something out. This company employs over 300 people. The ripple effects of Draythorn's acquisition will be severe. You're right, Gerald. It will be severe. But those 300 employees should direct their concerns to the people who created this situation. I looked pointedly at Trevor and Victoria. I'm not responsible for cleaning up messes I didn't make. Victoria's composure finally cracked. You vindictive witch. You're destroying innocent people's livelihoods because your feelings were hurt. I smiled at her, the same calm smile I had worn while emptying the bank accounts. No, Victoria. I'm simply taking back what was always mine. The innocent people you're worried about will land on their feet. The guilty ones, however, might find the landing a bit rougher. The silence in Gerald's office stretched uncomfortably as the full implications of my actions sank in. Trevor sat slumped in his chair, staring at the financial documents as if they might somehow change before his eyes. Victoria had moved to stand behind him, her hand on his shoulder, in a gesture that might have looked supportive if her face wasn't twisted with barely controlled rage. Gerald broke the silence first. Simone, I need to ask directly. Is there any way to reverse this? Can you buy back the stake from Draythorn? Even if I wanted to, which I don't, Draythorn has already begun implementing changes. They've been waiting for an opportunity like this for years. By next week, they'll have installed their own management team and started restructuring operations to align with their business model. James Fletcher looked up from his calculator. Without the Meridian project contract and with Draythorn controlling our operations, we're looking at potential layoffs within the next 60 days. The numbers don't work anymore. Trevor finally found his voice. Simone, please. I know last night was terrible, but this affects everyone. These people are innocent. Are they? I asked calmly. Let me read you something. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to the voice recording I had made the previous night. Victoria, Would you like to hear your own words from last night's celebration? Victoria's face went white. You recorded us? I recorded a public conversation in a public space. Perfectly legal. I pressed play, and Victoria's voice filled the office. That's the worthless wife who holds Trevor back. If he had any sense, he would have divorced her years ago. She contributes absolutely nothing to his success. The recording continued with Trevor's voice adding, Simone shouldn't even be here. This is a business event. Gerald's expression darkened as he listened. James Fletcher shook his head in apparent disgust. These were their colleagues hearing for the first time exactly how Trevor and Victoria had spoken about me in front of the entire leadership team. I also have recordings of several other conversations from that evening, I continued. Conversations where various employees discussed how I was dead weight and how Trevor would be better off without me. Apparently, this sentiment has been building for quite some time. Trevor stood up abruptly. Those people don't know what they're talking about. They don't understand our situation. You're right, Trevor. They don't understand that their jobs existed because of my money. They don't understand that their bonuses were paid with profits generated by strategies I developed. They don't understand that the dead weight they were mocking was actually the foundation holding up their entire company. Victoria stepped forward, her earlier fear replaced by desperation. Look, maybe I said some things I shouldn't have. I was drinking, and the conversation got out of hand. But you can't destroy an entire company because of one stupid comment. One comment? I laughed, and the sound was not pleasant. Victoria, you've been poisoning Trevor against me for months. You've been positioning yourself as his future wife while publicly humiliating his current one. Last night wasn't an isolated incident. It was the culmination of a pattern. I gathered my papers and stood to leave. I'll be serving divorce papers this afternoon, Trevor. I suggest you find a good attorney, though I'm not sure how you'll pay for one. Your salary from Kristen Global will likely disappear when Draythorn restructures, and as you'll discover, all of our other assets were purchased with my money. As I reached the door, Trevor called out desperately, What about the house? What about our retirement accounts? I turned back one final time. The house is in my name. The retirement accounts were funded by my income. You'll find that very little of what you considered ours was actually legally yours. I paused, letting that sink in. You might want to call Victoria's parents. I suspect you're going to need somewhere to stay. I was back home by 11 a.m., and the sense of liberation was overwhelming. 20 years of suppressed frustration and hidden resentment had been released in the span of 18 hours, and I felt lighter than I had in decades. My phone had been ringing constantly since I left Gerald's office, but I ignored every call. The house felt different now, not like a shared space I had to navigate diplomatically, but like my sanctuary. I walked through each room, mentally cataloging what belonged to me and what Trevor might try to claim. The artwork, the furniture, even his precious home theater system, all purchased with my income, while he contributed his modest salary to what he believed were our joint expenses. At noon, Harrison Webb called with an update. The divorce papers have been served. Trevor was still at his office, apparently in meetings with Draythorn representatives. The process server said he looked quite shaken when he received them. And the financial separation? Complete. Every asset purchased with your income has been legally secured. Trevor's personal possessions are limited to his clothing, his car, and about $15,000 in his personal checking account. Everything else belongs to you. I poured myself a glass of wine, a 2015 Bordeaux that cost more than Trevor's monthly car payment, and allowed myself to savor the moment. For 20 years, I had been the silent partner, the hidden supporter, the woman behind the man. Now, Trevor would discover what life looked like without that support. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. This isn't over. You've made a huge mistake. I recognized Victoria's vindictive tone even in text form. I typed back, You're right. It isn't over. It's just beginning. Then I blocked the number and settled into my favorite chair to watch the afternoon unfold. At 3 p.m., I heard a car door slam in my driveway. Through the window, I watched Trevor stumble out of his Mercedes, his face flushed, and his movements unsteady. He had been drinking, probably at some downtown bar after receiving the divorce papers. Victoria emerged from the passenger seat, her designer heels clicking frantically on the pavement as she tried to keep up with his erratic pace. Trevor began pounding on the front door. "Simone, open this door right now. We need to talk." I remained seated, calmly sipping my wine and watching through the security camera feed on my phone. Trevor's desperation was evident in every gesture, every shouted demand. This was a man who had just realized that his entire life had been built on a foundation he never understood. "I know you're in there," he yelled. "You can't just destroy everything we've built together." Victoria joined in, her voice shrill with panic. "This is insane. You're going to regret this. No one destroys a marriage over one stupid comment." I picked up my phone and dialed 911. "I'd like to report 2 people trespassing on my property and causing a public disturbance. They're intoxicated and becoming increasingly aggressive." Within minutes, I heard sirens in the distance. Trevor and Victoria's shouting grew more frantic as they realized the police were approaching. Through the window, I watched Trevor's face cycle through disbelief, rage, and finally, the dawning realization that his former life was truly over. The police officers were professional and efficient. After checking my identification and confirming that I was the sole owner of the property, they escorted Trevor and Victoria to their car and advised them not to return without legal representation. As I watched them drive away, Trevor's face pressed against the passenger window in a final, desperate gesture. I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete control over my own life. 6 months later, the consequences of that evening had reshaped multiple lives in Charlotte's business community. Trevor had been let go during Draythorn Industries' restructuring of Kristen Global, his position eliminated as redundant, and his performance record unable to justify his salary without the hidden support he had never known existed. Victoria's relationship with Trevor crumbled under financial pressure and mutual blame, leaving her scrambling to maintain the lifestyle she had grown accustomed to while dating a man she believed was independently wealthy. Gerald Morrison and several other executives managed to find positions with other companies, though it significantly reduced salaries, while James Fletcher took early retirement after his stress-related health issues became unmanageable. As for me, I rebuilt Velwick Solutions into an even more successful enterprise, free from the burden of secretly funding someone else's dreams, while my own contributions remained invisible. The revenge I had sought wasn't just about reclaiming my money or exposing their cruelty. It was about finally living authentically as the successful woman I had always been, without apologizing for my achievements or hiding them to protect someone else's fragile ego.